Hi, you're listening to Marketing with Vani, in which I speak to marketing gurus. Together, we decode how marketing works in the real world to grow your business. In episode number 8, which is the one episode prior to this, we discussed what is performance marketing and how can one make it work. In this episode, we will discuss the pitfalls of using performance marketing in isolation. To discuss this, I'm speaking with two stalwarts. The first is Pawan Sarda, Group CMO, Digital Marketing and E-commerce Future Group. And the second is Lloyd Mathias. He is a business strategist and angel investor. So first up, Pawan Sarda. The question to you, Pawan, is what is it about performance marketing? As we entrepreneurs sometimes get obsessed with analytics, what is it that we tend to forget? What do we need to keep in mind to make sure that performance marketing delivers to its best? And why is it that performance marketing in isolation doesn't always work? It still has to be married to the basic principles of marketing.
Great. Thank you, Vani. Thank you for getting me here. It's always lovely interacting with you. I always learn something from you, and that's the best part about you. I think this question is extremely valid because I personally feel that there is too much of obsession about performance marketing, but which is great. I think this is a medium, digital is a medium where you can exactly know where your customer is coming, where is it converting, at what cost it's converting, and so on and so forth. But I think the marketing principle, it doesn't change as far as I'm concerned, right? I think the if you go back and look at the marketing principle, the funnel is actually a very classical four ways of interacting with the customer, right? One is awareness, second is consideration, create conversion with the customer, and retention, right? I always go back to this funnel. So, of course, when it comes to awareness, right? If you have a business, if you have an idea, if you have a brand, people need to know what does it mean? How is it going to add value to me? I think that's the first and most important aspect. You have to go and tell customer what does it stand for, right? I think consideration is also to kind of play with the customer. I think social media does it really, really well, and that's why I think whether it's Instagram, Facebook, and so on really works because let customer play with your brand. Conversion of obviously is the most important thing which everybody expects. Anybody is into a digital business or for any brand for that matter. Yeah. But my point is that it will not happen if you don't create awareness and consideration funnel. That's extremely important, right? And that's where the core principle of marketing and brand creation comes into play. You have to create a brand. You have to create what does it mean. I literally take brand as a human being if you ask me, right? What does Vani stand for? What does anyone else stand for? I think that's extremely important. I think if you don't create that, I'm not too sure that how much conversion can you create. And I think somebody rightly told us, said this to you that beyond a point, performance marketing doesn't help. Of course, it won't help because if you want next level of jump for your business or a brand, you have to create the brand, right? Otherwise, it won't be possible.
So, what I get from what you're saying, Pawan, is that even in performance marketing, not even in performance marketing,
Yeah,
basically, if two brands cannot have identical campaigns, let's say both brands are food delivery services, two brands of food delivery services, or let's
right.
say two snack brands which are both internet first, are both running performance marketing campaigns, they cannot have identical campaigns because the campaign must be overlaid by what the brand itself is. And it's needless to say that the two products must have distinct brands, and that must come through in the performance marketing that they do.
100% Vani. I can't agree more. Obviously, if Zomato is chasing me, but I think for me, Zomato is also about, a brand which is obsessed with food. And I'm sure they've created this for me, right? When they create some sort of an offer or they create something to me, I think I respond to it better than some other brand who maybe I don't identify or I don't know of it, right? So, of course, I think what do you stand for? What is the value you're going to add to me? At a brand level is extremely important. And of course, when you go back and say that, this is what I'm giving you and you should convert and give me a transaction, I think that that really helps if you are able to create a good brand or a sharp positioning about your brand. That always helps. Why even compare two brands? I think the similar brand has to create different reasons for me to recruit me again and again, right? I mean, it actually goes for the same brand as well. If it wants to have, a better performance from its marketing.
Performance marketing, as the name suggests, focuses only on the performance of a marketing campaign and its results. This sounds perfect prima facie. Performance marketing is measured or measurable, it's quantified, optimized in real time, and the payment is based on the achievement of a defined goal. But we forget that to make performance marketing work, one must know who is the audience, what is their pain point, or what could delight them. Yes, you can run many experiments to check what message is working, but don't do that in the absence of sufficient prior work. This includes knowing your audience, know the brand's differentiator, your brand personality, the tone of voice, and the competitive context. Suppose you are a skincare brand. Should your performance marketing not look different from that of your competitors? Hide the brand name and the pack shot and check for yourself. The quality of leads is as valuable as the quantity of leads. You want to make sure that your brand enjoys credibility. Does your brand have adequate testimonials? Do you have proofs? Do you have a source story? Do you have technical substantiation? What is the chance that the leads generated by the campaign actually convert? Next, in this episode, I have Lloyd talking about why we get sucked into this temptation of throwing money into performance marketing without doing the right homework. So, Lloyd, tell me, since you work a lot with the early stage startups, all startups first go to is performance marketing because that seems like the easiest, and not just the easiest, but the most efficient one, as is construed to be, for spending money. You spend X amount of money and you can be relatively sure that you will get Y results. However, performance marketing is not all about numbers, and you may have heard this as well, where entrepreneurs say that beyond a point, my performance marketing has hit a ceiling and I'm not able to do any better. So, do you think that there is merit in thinking of performance marketing as another tool that must be coupled with the principles of traditional marketing in order for it to deliver better?
Great question, Vani. I completely agree. I think the bogey of performance marketing has reduced a lot of marketing inputs into pure data points, right? While I always believe that marketing within a business has to be accountable and has to, in a sense, drive the business, grow revenue, increase the sales funnel, and so on and so forth. I think equating marketing purely in terms of performance marketing is a limitation. I think the core thing that marketing does is actually build a larger presence of the brand in a consumer's mind, right? And therefore, purchasing and increasing his desire to buy is one aspect, but very often it's a range of other things. And performance marketing tends to ignore it because it boils marketing down to some core metrics of cost per click, cost per purchase, cost per transaction. And I think those metrics tend to be limiting. And therefore, what I've seen, and I would say this is slightly more skewed to early stage companies, like you said, the easiest aspect of marketing first is to get a couple of young marketeers and kind of give them targets in terms of, I want this post to reach X amount of people and I want my campaign to hit X amount of likes. So I think
Yes.
it's easy in terms of metrics, it's easy to justify. But in the long term, it may not always bring value. I do understand the emergency of the business, and increasingly businesses are getting more transactional. And the whole world is moving to a kind of quarter by quarter, and CEOs' lifespans are kind of dramatically getting, or their corporate lifespans are getting dramatically reduced. And that whole zeal for showing results to investors and to analysts, I think there's a little bit of short-termism that has crept into the entire business process. I think it's global, driven all the way from large corporations, the pressures of Wall Street, the pressures of analysts. I think that's true.
Why are brand marketing and performance marketing considered to be two ends of the spectrum? People suffer from this perception that the two are vastly different, that one is about generating transactions and the other is about doing some soppy emotional stuff. The reality actually lies somewhere in between. Why does performance marketing hit a ceiling? Why does it stop performing? Perhaps because the basics of marketing have not been paid adequate heed to, which is simple stuff like who is my customer? Who am I going after? What insights do I have on them? Is my proposition crafted from a consumer lens? Do I know where this consumer of mine is actually hanging out? And hence, am I targeting the right media vehicles at the right time? So, simple stuff like that performance marketing is not just about transactions. Performance marketing is also about thinking of the basics and making sure that you have the basics of the brand sorted. And brand marketing is not just about doing a long soppy film.
I agree with you there. Like I said, my point is that a business leader or business owner has to be able to look at it holistically. He can't really necessarily look at it in a binary, right? So therefore, I believe that in the early stage or when a company has its objectives to meet in terms of funding, in terms of getting additional investors, I think a lot of the focus necessarily has to be around hard metrics, right? What does marketing do to drive sales, to increase revenue? And that's completely acceptable. My belief is that the balance has to be maintained because as a company grows, you need to put something into the bucket for the long term. And I think, therefore, everything that a business does that helps increase the brand's longevity in a consumer's mind, which is like building emotional connect, which is like telling a story, is what will pay off in the long run, right?
Very
So
nice.
the short term will drive you into a transaction. So it's like the equivalent of what we would call price off schemes versus brand stories, right? There is a time and place to do a price off scheme because you
Right.
want to drive traffic, you want to grow share, you want to increase your share of shelf, and there is a time where you want to build a larger story because that's when consumers are going to become long term loyal. They're going to become more easy. And remember, loyal consumers cost less to maintain, right? Transactions are always going to be, like a little bit of a carrot kind of approach, right? You're going to throw something at them. Whereas loyal consumers come back almost by habit. And therefore, I think thematic advertising and building brands sometimes help on that part. And it's important to take a balance between them.
Very nice. Very nice. And on that note of balance, can I ask you, could a marketer actually fall victim to what we call data terrorism? In the sense that there's almost this pressure on marketers now, even to look smarter, it feels as though, oh, I must be able to show I'm using so much data and that every decision that I'm taking is in fact guided by data. How should a marketer not fall victim to this pressure?
I'm a big fan of integrating more and more data into the marketing process, right? So I think the more you know about the market, about your consumer, about segments within your consumer, about the nature of what they do, the better is the quality of your marketing output, right? So that's completely, I'm totally on the side of data. I also do believe that data helps largely in terms of more sharply customizing your marketing communication. So I think that part is also good.
Very
The
nice.
other challenge I think is also that marketers and CMOs generally, whether they're answerable to the board or the executive committee, I think they fall victim to the entire data trap, which means, all marketing has to be ROI justified, right? Logically, that seems good. And,
Right.
a lot of number crunchers love the idea that a marketer tells them that, look, I spent X amount of money and I got Y returns. But
Huh.
unlike all your other transactions, your procurement and supply chain, which can be very hard-nosed data, marketing will always have some part which is inexplicable because you're dealing with consumer behavior, right? And consumer behavior is not as precise as measuring machines or measuring supply times. So the causal effect is not so natural. So I think the moment you understand and recognize that gray zone, that consumer behavior will have its own variances. A great communication may strike a chord with the consumer, but it might trigger his need for purchase a 6 months or a year down the line. I think until you recognize that, it will always be a little incomplete.